Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Getting Started.Life on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. We're a show about starting new things and the 5 steps needed to start those new things and the 1 mistake to avoid. As a reminder, we're brought to you by Keystone Mediation. If you're looking for any mediation help in divorce, separation, real estate, Keystone Mediation can help you out with that, as well as Red Lake Funding. If you're looking for financing in the fix and flip, fix and hold, buy and hold space, give a call over to Red Lake Funding. They'll be able to help you out. So today, very, very appropriate topic because everybody hears about the big resignation, right? And we've all heard about a tough labor market and a recession coming. So my mind, I thought about, is it the right time to move, to get a new career, start a new job, get settled in before that recession hits, and take advantage of the tight labor market? And we've got a great guest today, Marilyn Fettner. And there's so many things. We didn't get all of them in there. MA, MS, CCC, NCC, and LCPC. I'm not even going to have you go into what all those are, but basically you're a coach. It looks like you do life coaching, career coaching, executive coaching, and really want to thank you for coming on the program today. So
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about what you do so our listeners can understand your credentials.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. So basically, I help people figure out what is the best life for them. And often I ask people, how do you want your life to be? And many times people don't know how to answer that. They've never had that question, and it's a stumper. So then we go about figuring that out. So, in terms of career coaching and life coaching, they really intertwine, they're connected. Someone very wise once said to me, Marilyn, everything is connected. And I believe that is the truth. So, as you may know, listeners, people who may be very miserable, unhappy in their career, in their workplace situation, it can often impact what's going on at home in their personal lives and vice versa. So I work in both areas. How do you want your life to be? How do we help you figure out how to have career happiness?
How did you end up in this career?
Thank you for that question. I love that question. So it's kind of an evolution. And I don't want to go into all the steps and twists and turns, but what I will say is I think I was very much impressed, unfortunately, by my father's experience with his work. Every day when he came home, we would hear him just complain about all the inequities, the difficulties, and I remember thinking, gosh, it shouldn't be that way. And as I got a little older, I really became entranced with work. That sounds probably a little crazy, but I had this idea as a kid. I don't think I ever want to retire. I just think it would be boring. I want to be engaged. I want to do something productive. And so putting those two ideas together, I felt it was really important to be able to help people find something that speaks to them, where they can feel a sense of fulfillment, because that is really the largest amount of time that we spend in a 24-hour period for many of us. And even for people I work with where income is not an issue, they want to do something productive. They want to be engaged. They want to be connected. That's a huge part of what we need as human beings. So I guess it's sort of a calling.
Well, and I think too that it's changed over the years, right? You talk about your dad, and he probably worked at the same job, if not the same place,
Yes.
for a very long time. And then
Yes.
retirement was a definitive event instead of,
Yeah.
Many of us have multiple iterations of our careers, right? We started in one thing that evolved to something else,
Yes.
and then maybe more consciously evolving it as we get older.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that we need to give ourselves the flexibility to do. So maybe something we spent a lot of time on in terms of educating ourselves and money, but we're miserable. I work with many people like that, and they're very hesitant to let go of that. But when you're miserable, we often don't make decisions about our careers for the right reasons. And many people come to me saying, you know, I just sort of fell into this. I never made a deliberate choice, and I want to now be able to give myself the gift of making a choice.
Now, with that, is there ever the school of thought to say, pardon me, I have other passions that
Yes.
give me joy, so maybe a job is just a job? And before we kind of
Yeah.
go into the 5 steps, is it
Sure.
sometimes, hey, you know what, you've got limited ability to earn or something like that, but you like doing other stuff?
Oh, that's a great point, Doug. Yes. And over the years, I've worked with many people who are artists, whether it's visual arts, musical arts, performance. And some people have found a way that seems to work for a while to satisfy their passions. But for most people in the arts, the ability to earn a viable living is sporadic. And so they have to find something that can support them. And if they have a family, intermittently in between the ability to earn money through their artistic expression. But for some people, and I will say I'm going to flip that a little bit, because some people make the assumption that if I do what I love, I'll never survive financially. And I think due diligence is a key step in the process that I embrace. We have to get the data.
Now, before jumping into the 5 steps, and a lot of our, we're on the Going Solo network, right? So a lot of the thought is always in a vacuum, an individual consideration. How often do you have spouses or other family members as part of the discussion? Because as you're talking about, you can't make a living at it. I mean, sometimes spousal couples or other couples will leapfrog, right? The one will do the job to bring in the money while the
Yeah.
other chases a career. And then once that person's established in a career, they can move on. Do you bring other people into the decision during the viability determination?
That's an interesting question. Sometimes, and I will leave that up to my client. If they want their spouse or their partner, or sometimes it's even a parent. I work with many people in their 30s and 40s whose parents have contacted me. So yes, if that client wants to bring in their family member or their significant other, absolutely. And I will mention, of course, sometimes it's people who have been at home as the primary caregiver, either for children or for parents, and it could be male, female, however people identify themselves in terms of gender, but it's not limited. Anyone and everyone, who's been away from the workforce, how do I reenter? And what do I do? And so, yes, and I do encourage people to speak with others who are affected, by their decision about what they do with their job or their career.
So let's jump right in. So let's say somebody's decided they want to make a change. And I'm saying decided they want to make a change without like a lot of detail, right? Because that, and I'll be interested to hear your perspective on knowing what you want to do versus using someone like you to determine maybe what the right thing is to do. But what's the first step? What should they be doing when they've decided that they want to change careers?
Well, now I think you said, if I can get some clarification, that you're going to differentiate between someone who is trying it on their own versus someone who might be working with a coach.
Not necessarily. I mean, ultimately, I think working with a coach drives accountability, but I think there's still the steps, whether it's DIY or whether they're working with you.
Sure.
So You don't
Absolutely.
necessarily have to split it up, but we'll defer to your expertise.
Okay, yeah, good point. And I do often hear from people who've tried it on their own, who've read books, and that's great for many people. So I would say the first step is to get to know yourself. And in my process, I refer to that as discover. So know what you're good at. Figure out what your abilities are. Learn about your personality style. Learn what is interesting to you. Learn what's important to you, what you care about, your values, and learn what skills you have that you enjoy using. Sometimes people will think that, oh, I'm good at math. I'm going to do something in math, but they don't really like math. They're good at it. So there can be that disconnect between what someone is good at and what they enjoy. So gather all this data. There are many books out there where you can do these little self exams. There are many what I will refer to as knockoffs online, like knockoffs of the Myers-Briggs type indicator, that sort of thing. And here's an area that many people consciously or unconsciously steer away from: the money piece. How much money do you need? So what are your financial needs? What are your financial goals? Do an expense analysis. And there are also programs online that are free. Figure out your expenses. And again, talk with anyone else who is going to be impacted by what you decide to do, who has financial interest with you, because it should be a collaborative decision in terms of the money piece. How much do we need? And sometimes people will, of course, let go of certain expenses. They'll change houses. They'll get rid of an expensive lease for their car. They'll make other changes to improve their quality of life if they've really been miserable in a career that, although it has brought them a lot of money, it can't take it anymore.
So I do want to touch on something that you said about being good at versus liking it. And
Yeah.
I found that interesting because usually you like what you're good at, partly because you're getting praise for it, partly because you have success. Is it a matter of completely taking that off the table, or is it figuring out why you're good at it and maybe the angle that you're approaching it from is where the problem is, not that task? And as part of knowing yourself, is that important?
Absolutely. And I want to address the latter part of what you said, the angle at which you're approaching something. I often work with people in finance. They're very good with numbers. They understand a lot of aspects of finance. And it turns out that the particular environment that they're in and the role that they're in is just boring. It just leaves them cold. They don't care about it. It's not fun. But when they switch up to a different application of their knowledge and skills, so for example, someone who's worked in finance, but they're kind of bored with it. And there might be another part of them, one that wants to engage more with other people, one that wants to use their creative abilities. So there are other abilities there and part of their personality style and their interests that are not getting fed by having a role where they're crunching numbers, they're not interacting with people very much. There's the repetitive end of month reports and things like that. So working as a finance expert in a sales or marketing team sometimes can be much more interesting and engaging. Does that answer your question? That's an example of how that can work. So yes, and the way that I approach the discover stage is to help a person look holistically at themselves. So to understand what they're good at and what's interesting to them, what their personality style is, what's important to them, their values, and the skills they have that they enjoy. using?
I can imagine this step taking a really long time for some people. Like some people could probably move through the step pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But some people, if they haven't really reflected on this or aren't particularly self-aware, this could take a long time.
It can. And that's a question I get often. Thank you for that question. I can imagine a lot of listeners are wondering, how long would this take? I always present the option to people. We can do the deep dive, or we can do a quicker approach. Or for people who are doing that DIY approach, I mean, not everybody is very introspective. Some people need to talk this out with another person. Some people can just write it out or talk to a good friend, that sort of thing. And they can, really clarify the information that they need. But at the end of doing all of this work in the discovery phase, it's important to identify the nuggets of information that you get and then create sort of a profile for yourself. I refer to it as your best fit snapshot or your career profile. And we get a picture of what you need to have satisfaction. And we have the money piece in there also to support the lifestyle that you want.
Now, do you recommend when people are doing this? I mean, obviously it's a solo activity, but it also seems like there's huge value, even if they're doing it with a coach, running by what they determine, right? Like, I think if I wrote down what I thought of myself and then gave it to like my wife or somebody,
I was thinking the same thing.
It would be really markedly different, right? There's that perception. It's the old, when you look in the mirror, you think you're 30 and it's like, no, I'm 50, right? Like,
yep.
And there's that perception. So is that part of that first phase, that first step?
I think that makes sense. Many people will take this worksheet that I offer, your best fit snapshot, but people can make their own, create categories for all of the areas that I've mentioned, and then give it to another person that you trust, by the way, and have them fill it out for you. What happens, though, what I have found in my experience is that there are places where the person and we'll just say their friend, they agree. And then there are some other areas where the person was not aware that they gave a particular impression or had certain talents. By the way, it is usually positive what they're hearing from their friend that they were not necessarily aware of. So,
but as long as it's constructive, I'm guessing like it's good no matter what, right? Because
yes,
I think determining a lot of this stuff is key, and I think then going in with the headspace of open-minded, thick skin, really wanting, if you really want to change, you have to be open to change an opinion. And I would be interested to know how many people really enter into this process that way.
To change? Is that what you're asking about?
Well, to change into actual candid and, I'm not going to say brutal, but, honest evaluation by other people, because that's really that step, right? Otherwise, they might be chasing change in a career when it's themselves who really are the issue.
Well, have a feeling you're hinting at something that could go a little more deeply there, but I'm going to state the shallow end. And in career counseling, it might be more in life coaching where we're looking to help this person make positive change within themselves. In career coaching, if they want to change careers and they are locked in to something in their own head that they feel they have to pursue and they have to be good at, yes, we need to then help them see where their strengths really are and no one is strong in all areas, and to value those areas that they, except for you, Doug, that they are strong in, and to help them build on that. Sometimes people will come to me and say, I'm not good at X, and I want you to help me be good at X. Well, I would rather say, let's see what else you're good at naturally and help you build on those strengths.
Right.
In career coaching, we don't try to make someone succeed at a job that they're just not good at. It doesn't, maybe if they had all the time in the world to learn it and to practice, but that's not the reality of working at a job. There's a particular period of time where you're expected to learn and then perform.
So we're going to go to a quick commercial break and pick up the other 4 steps in the mistake. So we'll be back right after this break.
Sounds good.
All right, and we are back with Getting Started.Life on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. As a reminder, this show is brought to you by Keystone Mediation and Red Leg Funding. Anybody just joining us, our show today is about starting new careers, and great guest again, Marilyn Fettner, life coach, career coach, all-around coach. And I was afraid that what would happen is happening is we'd run out of time. So I want to make sure that we're staying on track.
Okay,
so
sure.
the first step that you had was know yourself, right? Learn yourself, learn about what you're good at, all the things that are probably material for making that move. What's the next thing that our listeners should do if they've decided that they want to make a change in their career?
Yes. So this is the biggest portion of due diligence. This is explore. So as a result of the discover, the first phase, they will create, as I mentioned, even if they're doing it themselves, a worksheet of some sort, a career profile with the highlights. Here's a description of what I fit, what is going to be a good match for me. And then we use that as sort of the cheat sheet or the answer sheet. This is what we're looking for. So many of the assessments that they will have taken, whether, again, it's on their own worksheets in a book, or if they work with a coach, will give them careers that fit their results. So, or even if they have ideas of careers on their own, they start to explore those careers. There's a tremendous amount of information available on the internet, and they look to see how good of a fit is their match, their description with various careers that they're looking at. What's also important, the Bureau of Labor Statistics produces a lot of information about earnings and about career projection. So what is the demand for these particular kinds of careers? So it's important to know that before you decide on a career path, that you have as much information as you can about what it's really like. So it's important to also conduct some information interviews and to have a good description also, and to additionally understand what you could earn and what the projections are for demand. So will there actually be a demand for what you decide to follow in terms of your career path? So that's the second step. The third step is the plan. So as a result of the information you gather from the explore stage or explore step, you'll then put together your plan. So does this mean that you can start looking for jobs now? Maybe. Does this mean you need some additional education, a few classes, a short certification program, or are you willing and able to engage in a longer degree program? So these are all options, but once you have that information, then you can figure out what are the next steps. And it's really helpful to break the plan down into steps, set some milestone dates, because otherwise it's just sort of gray matter out there, so to speak. So you want to have the steps and potential dates, and this can help you track how you're going. And if you need to extend your dates, great. But at least you have something that you have recorded that you are working toward. And then the next day,
Real quick,
yeah,
then as a coach, because you said something that stuck out in my mind
yes,
was the introduction of the different types of preparation you might have to do, right? Anything from education to, buying certain equipment or whatever.
mhm,
When you coach someone, are you in tune with some of the resources out there to help them, right? I know there's a lot of like I'm a veteran, there's a lot of stuff out there for veterans to reinvent themselves.
ah.
Do you help people find ways to make it more viable?
Are you talking about scholarships
Well,
or?
just any resources, right? Sometimes there's secondary markets for equipment. There's so many things that can make it a reasonable
Mhm.
a reasonable transition where at first it wouldn't be.
Yes, that's a great question. And I didn't know that you were a veteran. So thank you for your service, Doug.
Thank you.
Yes. So, yes, I will definitely work with them along the way in those steps that are necessary to help them figure out how to make their desired path into a reality, whatever that might be.
Now,
How
is there?
often,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mariah.
how often do you see people do like real pivots, right? Like I'm thinking, the accountant who becomes, performing at like real pivots. I think it would be just interesting to hear a couple of those like big turnarounds.
Yes. Well, I can think of someone that I worked with who, but I will say this. I have a few people in mind. Often, though, it looks like a big pivot on the outside, but knowing where their abilities are, their skills, their values, their interests, it's not a big surprise when you look at it. It's just a different way that they are applying all of their talents. But one person that comes to mind is someone who had worked as in business in a very corporate environment, and led teams and also worked around the space of technical writing, who then pivoted to becoming a high school teacher.
Okay.
And let me see, the other person also worked in business in a technical area in IT and became a landscape architect.
Oh.
Yes. And I also know someone, now this is not such a huge pivot, but she was a graphic designer and became a landscape architect. And you can probably see the relationship there. Yes.
It's definitely on my short list. Landscape architect, I think, would be a very cool job.
Really? Yes. Yes, it is. It brings into play so many different abilities and talents, and you use your creativity and
be outside.
So question, Marilyn, before people are going into this plan, and we talked about open-mindedness, right? And I think open-mindedness in yourself, but open-mindedness to like, it may not be the right way to go, and that someone might have any other suggestions.
yes.
How often do you just have to intervene and go, for whatever reason, like this is not the right way to go? Like, you know what I mean?
I do. Did you hear me sigh when you asked that question?
I did.
Yeah, that's very, very tough. And I think if there are any coaches listening, this is one of, I think, the most important functions of a coach. But I will say this, someone who is either pursuing something that is not viable, where they really, let's say they need stable income, and yet they want to pursue something where this is not at all going to give them stable income, most likely, or someone is pursuing a career where they don't have the abilities. So I'm not saying skills, because we can learn skills, but those natural abilities are not there. And so I approach it by coming around the corner, so to speak. Part of that is my style also. I'm not confrontational. And I work to help the person see what their attributes are and show them, here is the reality. Here are the attributes needed, because there's a lot of data where that's going to be evident. And here are your attributes. And so what do you think? How do you feel about that? Have you had experiences where you've had to do X, and how has that gone? And usually the person will say, oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, that has been hard for me. And so I try to get them to recognize that. Yes. Tough question.
Well, we knew we had a good guest who could answer them. Well, and I want to ask one more question before going on to the next step also is, what advice can you give people about not psyching themselves out, right? Because I think when they see a ton of education or they see a competitive career, right, they might look and say, never going to happen because of all these things, right? And you're a coach, but not everybody can afford a coach and all that. Like, how can they overcome that?
How can they overcome
Like
thinking?
the trepidation of like what could seem insurmountable, right? Again, school, the cost of school.
Yeah.
Again, we talked about equipment a little. Like, there's so many things that stand in the way, and that's why people don't do it.
Yes, I would say absolutely. That's one of the reasons people, maybe two reasons, is they think something is unachievable or insurmountable, or there are really difficulties that are hard to achieve. I'd say number one, break it down. Don't look at it as one big, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to do this. Break it down into small bits. What's the first step I need? What's the second step? And it will take time, because there's probably going to be some research required to look, if it's a matter of cost, like you suggested, Doug, they're going to have to look for alternatives, right? Either where they can purchase the resources they need at lower cost, maybe something that's used but in good condition, or resources for funding. I don't work directly with the Small Business Association, but some people find this to be a very good resource. So something like that. I do want to mention, by the way, that community colleges, most of them offer career counseling at a very reasonable rate. So for anyone listening who does want to go through the process with someone who's trained, doesn't have a lot of resources, that could be an option. And here and there are different kinds of community resource centers as well. So that could be an option. But yes,
I'm guessing their network as well, right? In this day and age,
yes,
we're building a network that way. So
absolutely. And that is so important, Doug. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes. And often I work with many people who are shy, introverted, have not had the experience of reaching out to people for connections, and they make that jump, that leap of faith, and it is astounding. It's one of the coolest things that I experience when they do make those connections and things start to happen for them.
all right. So again, we've got, I think, enough time to finish. So we're on step 4, correct?
Yes, market.
Okay.
So just as companies need to brand themselves, candidates need to brand themselves. Whether you're thinking of going into your own business or whether you're thinking of applying for an employee type of role or independent contractor, your market, whomever that is, they need to know what you stand for. So whether it's a resume, it's a LinkedIn profile or other social media, your presentation of yourself needs to be cohesive. And for people who are job hunting, you're putting in key terms in those search engines. Well, guess what? Recruiters are doing the same. So you need to create your profile using the same search terms that you're using to search, that recruiters are also using to find you. It's sort of like a version of SEO. So personal branding, your resume needs to show a match, specific match for the kinds of jobs that you're targeting. And again, your LinkedIn profile as much as possible. Try to have a more recent photo, something that looks professional in your profile if you're on Instagram. And the networking, again, is really cool. Even if you think you can't do it, talk to a good friend who can maybe help you pump up your confidence and reach out. And I want to mention, as an aside, I've got a low battery warning here. And I apologize. I might be having an issue with my new laptop. So rather than end abruptly, is there something that we should?
Well, one thing I did want to ask you though,
yes,
was as you were talking, the low battery thing made me lose my train of thought. No, but as you're talking about marketing, I love that. But now my mind all of a sudden went to step 1.
Oh yeah.
But and somehow filtering all the things you find out about yourself into the marketing terms. But where's a good resource to get the information on what that audience wants to see, right? Because they don't want you to necessarily know what they're looking for.
Well, actually, you might be surprised, but the job descriptions that someone is targeting, that they may be applying to, contain a lot of good data there to let you know what the employer is looking for. Sure, there could be surprises later on, but for the most part, that's your source of data.
So before your computer dies, if it dies, let's hit step number 5 real fast, and then the big mistake, and we can double back with any questions with the time we've got remaining.
Absolutely. So step 5 is achieve. And that can also include interview practice. So whether you do it with a good friend or you do it with your dog looking at you or whatever it is, practice out loud answers to questions. It should be conversational as much as possible. And with regard to step 5, other aspects of achieve, this is on-the-job coaching, so to speak. So whether it's communication skills, interpersonal skills, relationship building, often I hear from people who do their job just great, but they're not building the relationships with clients, customers, coworkers, and that becomes an issue in their role. So assimilating into the new culture, getting along in the culture, learning the power players, learning the politics, whether you're working from home or you're working on site or you're doing a hybrid. There are always some politics. Hopefully they're more constructive rather than destructive. But yes, so that is being successful in your role.
Oh. So what do we think the biggest mistake would be? Should we take our guesses at it?
I would, I think, take a guess at it. And well, first you throw yours out.
Overthinking it would probably be, for me, like the biggest mistake would, and kind of what you said, getting in your own head or talking yourself out of it, right? Like, so both of us have gone through some career changes and iterations. But I can imagine if I was like, okay, this job sucks. Take this job and shove it. What do I want to do next? That would be a daunting task, and I think I would get overwhelmed with it.
I hear you, because you and I, right, there was always the argument of perfection versus good and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, my thought is it's not being realistic and not being pragmatic, right? And that's, I think, people tend to make an emotional decision. As I said before, they may be leaving something or running away from something as opposed to really wanting to make the change, and then not being realistic, one, about what it's going to give them, and two, realistic on getting there, right? Like it could be just too dang hard, right? So, I think when people do this, and part of it might not be having that open mind, right? The open mind to say, wow, I went in thinking this is what I'm going to do, and I didn't even know about this, right? Like, and I see it right now with my kids, right? Like the cool part about talking about new careers is the same conversation I'm having with my 16-year-old right now about like, hey, what do you want to do? And I'll bring up a job and he's like, well, I thought it was this, right? And he finds out that there's a lot of other stuff, but then hearing what his expectations for like the job and what salary and all that kind of stuff, you just get way out of whack, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's just not having that realistic view of what will be there, not what's possible, because I really think it is all possible, but the realistic view of what it is and what it can bring.
What does the day look like? Yeah. What is it? What is it actually to do the job?
Right. Oh, yeah. Totally. And what's involved, like I always, I was talking to someone the other day who I know real well and was talking about the aspect of like work versus performative, right? Like practice versus performance.
Yep.
And this person loves the performance side of it, but hates the practice part of it, right? And it's like, okay, well, no wonder you're unhappy, right? Like 90% of what you got to do to perform well is the preparation in this case. So it was an interesting conversation, but, I just got an email from Marilyn. She apologized for having her computer die. I can make a joke about Apple because it's probably an Apple. I was kidding there, but I'm not an Apple guy. But what I would say is I do want to thank Marilyn for being here. I know she can't say thank you back. But if anyone wants to reach her, best way is FettnerCareerConsulting.com. That's FettnerCareer and then consulting.com, or you can reach her at Marilyn at FettnerCareerConsulting.com. All this will be on the site, on the replay. But again, even, this tells you how important this stuff is. We got a ton of great information before everything died. So again, thanks for listening to Getting Started.Life on the WGSN Going Solo Network. Again, we're a show about starting new things, starting new endeavors, the steps to be successful and the mistakes to avoid. If there's something you want to know about, let us know. Really, I don't think we have any off-limit topics, but we'll find the expert. There's a lot of people out there who love to talk about what they do. And if there's something you want to talk about, reach out to us. Let us know the information you want to share, and I'm sure we can make a show around that. We record every other Tuesday at noon. You can catch it here live or on the replay. Again, this is Getting Started.Life. This week's show was brought to you by Keystone Mediation. If you're looking for help with mediation, divorce, separation, any area where you want to come up with a mutually agreed upon great outcome, reach out to Keystone Mediation. And Red Leg Funding. If you're looking for financing for your next investment project, your next flip, your next rental property, reach out to Red Leg Funding at www.redlegfunding.com. They'd love to help you out. Thanks so very much. We'll listen to you, or we'll look for you listening in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye.